Tonight I want to do this in a little bit different fashion. I normally have a lot of slides and a lot of graphics, and I think that's very helpful in teaching. Tonight I am going to have slides, of course, but most of those are going to be just scripture references that I want to talk through with you. And mostly tonight I want to talk to you from my heart. I want to reveal a little bit about my own experience and walk you through this question of trials, lengthy, difficult trials. I've written a number of things down tonight that I'll be reading. I want to make sure that I get what I want to say exactly right. So forgive me if I'm looking at notes a little bit tonight. I have a purpose in that. I don't want to misstate or misspeak on any of the things I want to talk about tonight. First of all, let me speak to you as Paul did. Let me speak to you as a man for a few moments. When I walked in and sat down on the back row of Knightsville Baptist Church the morning of April the 1st, 2019, I was an utterly shattered man. That morning at 4 a.m., the Lord told me the long trial He had put me through was now over. From that day forward, He would withdraw His hand of adversity from my life. In the season preceding that day, He had battered me about like a 100-pound weakling in the ring with the world's greatest prize fighter. Layer by layer, He had stripped nearly everything from me. He had taken my wealth. Nearly $250,000 of cash, equity, and retirement were all gone. I was living paycheck to paycheck and fighting just to get by. I even lost my home at one point, forced by an untimely layoff to move in with my in-laws and have my family's food purchased by someone else. He had taken my ministry. I was resisted fiercely by God's own people. My family and I, the source of rumors and gossip, public and private attacks of all sorts. The wicked in the churches even came to my home to accost my children. I was accused of having a, quote, world domination plan, being in ministry for the money, though at the time I had made only $27,000 a year and lived in a parsonage, and was dismissed from 2 churches without cause. As a result of difficulties in ministry, I was forced to move my family 5 times in 8 years to 3 different states. At one point, due to the trauma, we were completely out of the church for nearly 5 years. Not only this, but He had also taken my reputation. While once a man respected in both the spiritual and secular kingdoms, I was now viewed as an utter has-been in both areas. In that time, He had made me endure no less than 5 great, complete humiliations, as everything I tried to do crashed down in abject failure around me. In addition to the ministry collapses, I was falsely accused and demoted at work with no opportunity to defend myself, and I was defrauded of thousands of dollars, causing me to beg for help to pay my own mortgage. All the while, spiritual attacks were incessant. I was assaulted by demons every night for months in dreams. They tormented me with visions of catastrophe in my family, in my life, in the world. They tempted me with lustful images and situations. I felt their presence in my bedroom on many occasions, at my very side. One night a demon tried to suffocate me in my pillow. All hell was let loose on me. The Lord even took my sanity. There were days when I felt the cords of my mind were unwinding inside my head. The stress and disappointment and confusion were so great, it seemed my mind was certain to be lost to madness. I fell to the floor in tears more times than I could count. As I prayed on my face in my closet, I threw things, pounded the floor, and yelled over and over and over, "Why, God? What have I done to deserve such pain and anguish and heartbreak?" How did all this great trial get started, you ask? Did I commit some great crime, murder a fellow human being, or get caught in adultery? No. I left my high-paying secular job to give my life to full-time ministry. I sacrificed all I had to become a pastor. And how long did this trial go on, you ask? For 13 long years. I tell you this to introduce what I want to talk to you about tonight. By the way, it's the first time I've ever publicly discussed the things that have happened to me. And I asked my wife tonight that the children not even listen in to the message because I didn't want them to hear the details of what happened. Tonight I want to talk to you about great trials, long trials. God sees fit to put us through short trials, medium trials, and long trials. There are some listening to the sound of my voice tonight who are under the weight of a long, difficult trial. There are some of you who are facing a trial that you know will end in death, whether that be yourself or someone that you love. You know you've entered into that final phase, that this is not going to end in recovery, it's not going to end in life, it's going to end in loss and death. We have so many sources of great trials. Of course, there's sickness, there's divorce that can take years. The children, God forbid, get sick and endure long periods of difficulty. We have trials in a workplace, trials in family situations, and they seem sometimes to build up. One thing after another, after another, after another. And it gets very hard. You feel that you're pounded into dust. So I want to talk to you tonight. Our church, in fact, is in a period of trial now. We will see if that turns out to be a long and lengthy trial or if it will be passed in just a few weeks or months. It's difficult to say. I fear that our nation is headed towards a very long and very hard trial that will bring every corner of this land to its knees. What do we think about this issue of trial, these long and lengthy trials? And I want to talk to you tonight about this by looking at the trial that Job experienced. What can we learn from this book buried within the Bible that is so often a book that is ignored and overlooked? But I found it to be one of my favorite books in my long trial. Long-suffering servants, God's perspective on lengthy trials. Let's look at this and let's try to answer some very important questions about this thing called trial. Let's begin with this question. This is the sort of the overarching point of discussion we want tonight, and that is, why would God put us through such long and difficult trials? Why would a God who loves us be willing to allow us to endure such difficulty? Why would God allow me and so many others to experience what we experience? Well, let's begin tonight as we look at the book of Job. Let's begin by asking, who is it that brings trials? Who is it that actually brings trials? You remember the book of Job and you remember what Job lost. Satan took his family. His children were killed all in one day. He lost his wealth all in one fell swoop. And then he lost his health. Over many years, Job endured these trials and the repercussions of those trials. So the question I want to ask you tonight as we begin to look at Job is, who brings trials? Who ultimately is responsible for them? Let's look in the book of Job in chapter 1 and let's see who brings up Job first. You remember that there is a conversation that goes on between God and Satan about Job. And it was dawned on me as I began to read the book many years ago and study the book that it's not the one that you think that brings up Job first. Let's look at this and see. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. The sons of God in this context were the angels. And Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. Who is it, my friends, that first mentions Job in this discussion? It is the Lord. The Lord brought up Job to Satan. And that reveals the answer to the question, that ultimately it is God who is the one that brings our trials. God directs our trials. He does not simply respond to them. He is not coming along after something happens that he can do nothing about, and then being able to pull it all together and fix it. He is not in the back seat yelling for us to slow down. He is in the driver's seat telling us to buckle in. God is the one who initiates our trials. You may not believe me. You may believe that this example in Job is just a one-off kind of thing. This is throughout the Bible, my friends. My point to you tonight is that we are believing in a false God in the United States. We believe in a God who responds, not a God who drives our trials. But the God who responds to trials only is a figment of our imagination. He is an idol. That is not the true God. Let me show you some more verses on this. It is everywhere in the Bible. Who brings trials? Job 2:10. This is what Job said to his wife when she tells him to curse God. But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?" He says you're going to accept good from God, you have to accept adversity from God. He's saying here that God brings adversity. Job 19:21, he says to his friends, you remember there's this discussion that goes on in the book of Job over and over between Job's friends and Job about the reason for Job's trial, the reasons for his adversity and his suffering. And he makes this statement to his friends. He says, have pity on me, O you my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. The hand of God has struck me. Oh, you don't think that's enough? Let's continue on. Let's look at Psalm 119, verse 75. I know, O Lord, that your judgments are right, said the psalmist, and that in faithfulness you have afflicted me. You have afflicted me. Oh, we're not going to stop there, though. We're going to keep going. Let's look at another verse, Psalm 75, verse 7. But God is the judge. He puts down one and exalts another. Who does the putting down here, my friends? Is it time? Is it chance? Is it Satan? Is it bad luck? No, it is God. He puts down and He exalts. Let's go to Amos 3:6. Let's look at a broader picture of the calamities and chaos that go on within nations and in the world. Amos says, if a trumpet is blown in a city, will not the people be afraid? If there is calamity in a city, will not the Lord have done it? The Lord has brought the calamity. You say, oh, I don't believe that, Wes. Let's go on. Let's look at some more. Isaiah 45, verse 7. The Lord says, I form the light and create darkness. And that word darkness there means calamity. It means chaos. It means tumult, destruction, bad times, bad seasons. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. Not convinced yet, huh? Let's go on. Let's keep looking here. Who brings trials? Ecclesiastes 7, 13 and 14, the wise man Solomon says, consider the work of God, for who can make straight what He has made crooked? Who makes it crooked, folks? The Lord makes it crooked. In the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider, surely God has appointed the one as well as the other. We move on. Who crucified Christ? Who crucified Christ? You say the Pharisees did. You say the Romans did. Nope. Secondary causes. They were but an instrument. Of who? Let's look. Acts chapter 4. For truly against your holy servant Jesus, whom you have anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. Whose hand, my friends? The hand of God. Whose purpose, my friends? The purpose of God. God initiates our trials. In Acts chapter 2, men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs. Him, being delivered by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God, you have taken by lawless hands, have crucified, and put to death. My friends, God initiates our trials. It is not something He is simply responding to. No matter how bad it is, if it's cancer, God has initiated it. If it is the loss of a loved one, God has initiated it. Remember what Job lost. He lost his family, he lost his health, he lost his wealth, and he said, "The hand of God has touched me." My friends, God's power is so extreme. It is so high above us. It is so transcendent that He can be holy and without sin and yet use sin and death and evil for His purposes, so that we, like the psalmist can say when we become sick, when we lose our job, when we're thrown out of a church, we can say, "You, Lord, in faithfulness, You have afflicted me." Why do I say this? Why do I bring this up? Because we do not want to worship the idol of the American church any longer. This sort of wimpy God, this God who wrings His hands and wonders what He's going to do, is not the God of the Bible. I remember in a Facebook post, someone that I know, a young lady, she had put something on Facebook about God and COVID. And then I wrote her and I said, "Young lady, God is the one who has brought COVID. This is His judgment." And she wrote me back and she said, "That's not the God I believe in." And I wrote back to her and I said, "Well, then the God you believe in is an idol. God is in utter and complete control of our lives, to the point that even when calamity comes into them, we can say with Job, 'The hand of God has struck me.'" Why is this so important for you to understand? Why is this so important for me to understand? Because this is the only hope we actually have. Think about it. If God can come in and clean up the pieces, but He cannot control what happens to start the trouble, then what kind of a God is He? How can He actually deliver us? How can you count on Him to deliver you if He can't control the thing that comes into your life? And this whole statement by God's people that we don't know why trials come, that we don't understand the ways of God, is complete baloney. We do know God initiates, He designs underneath the curse, underneath the curse of sin and death, with Satan in the world, with sin in the world. He takes control of it and He uses it to drive it to His ends. It's the only hope that you have, that God is not just trying to pick up the pieces of your life, that this trial that you have, that this difficulty that you have, is His initiative. And you must trust Him now because He is good. The hope is that this hasn't happened because of some evil plan. This has happened because God is using all the forces in the world to bring about good for you. God initiates trials. He doesn't just respond to them. So the question then becomes, why do this to Job? Why do this to Job? You remember what the verses said. You remember what God said Himself about Job, don't you? Job 1:8, "Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil?'" You say, "Look, Wes, look at God's own statement about Job. Says that he was blameless and upright. He fears me and he does what is right. He shuns evil. Why on earth would God put this man through something like this?" Well, notice, my friends, that God does not say He is perfect. God does not say He is complete. God does not say that He is perfectly and completely transformed into the image of Christ. He simply says, among men, He is a righteous one. Among men, He stands out. But as I inspect His life, as I look down into His soul, I find things that are wanting. And my purpose is to make Job like me. My purpose is not to make Job better than everybody else. My purpose is to make Job like me. Because when Job becomes like me, then he has full peace. He has full joy. He fully reflects my glory. He fully accomplishes the purpose for which I created him. You see, God looked down into Job. And he saw, as righteous as Job was, deep within his soul, a great issue had developed. I wrestled with it for years, trying to understand how all the pieces of Job fit together. How is it that God can say that this man is righteous and compliment him so? And then he has this ongoing long discussion with his friends about why has evil come about in his life. And then at the end of the book, God's response, it never really made sense to me until I studied it closer and realized that God was working out something very deep within Job. Job was righteous, and that is why it took so much for God to get to that point deep within him that would reveal the sin that was in there. What was it? We'll talk about it in just a moment, but let's see our second principle. And that is that long trials correct deep spiritual issues within us. My friends, it is because you have come so far that God must put you through something so hard, because the layers of righteousness have been built, and He is going deep, deep, like a surgeon who has to go in and do open heart surgery, break open the ribs and dig deep down within the flesh to get to that issue that needs to be fixed. It's not something you can go in and an outpatient and get removed from the skin. It's something God must go in very deeply. And so a long trial is required to get down into there and see and fix. What was Job's issue? Let's look at his words. Let's see if you can start to recognize. I want to challenge you as I read these verses. What was Job's issue? Here are some comments that he had in discussion with his friends. You know, they came and they talked to him and they were accusing him of being evil. He is sinning. He needed to repent of his sin. And Job was saying, I haven't sinned. That's not why I'm suffering. Let's look at some of the comments that he made. So see if you can recognize it. He says to his friends, yield now. Let there be no injustice. Yes, concede. My righteousness still stands. Is there injustice on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern the unsavory? In other words, he's saying, look, I am very righteous, and I can tell when there's unrighteousness, and I don't see any unrighteousness in myself. What do you see there? Let's go on. In Job 13, he says, what you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you. But I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to reason with God. See now, I have prepared my case. I know that I shall be vindicated. Who is he who will contend with me? You starting to recognize it yet? Let's go on. Let's look at one more. Job 23, verse 3 through 7. He speaks of God. Job wants to talk to God. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come to his seat. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would know the words which he would answer me, and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in his great power? No. But he would take note of me. Oh, my friends, it took the loss of children, and it took the loss of money, and it took the loss of health. Years of trial, but eventually it was made manifest, wasn't it? What is his problem? His problem is pride. That is what God is doing all of this to correct. As we walk with God and learn to practice His ways more and more, a seed of arrogance can begin to grow within us. In our minds, our view of ourselves slowly rises, and our view of Him slowly falls. Without realizing it, we close the gap between ourselves and the Almighty, and forget that we are quite literally dust between His fingers, and He is quite literally all. I see this in myself as a young man heading into ministry. I was obeying God, yes, and giving up what I could to serve Him. But deep within me, I had not yet grasped the incalculable difference between the two of us. As I reflect on what He did in me those 13 years, one thing I see most clearly is how He hammered my view of myself down to a sheet so thin as to be nearly invisible. God is all, my friends. If it is to be done, He must do it. If it is done, His name alone must appear in the credits. You know, if you're spiritually aware, you should be noticing the good things that are happening in our church, within our congregation. We've been able, by the grace of God, to initiate new ministries. There's a whole new culture developing and a whole new attitude developing, and it is refreshing and it is a beautiful thing to see what is happening. But my friends, Job's error could easily become our error. We have nothing to be proud of. Whatever good we have done is by the grace of God Almighty. And if He were to count before us all of our failures, we would fall down and cry before His feet. We have so far yet to go as a congregation. We have all failed Him so long in so many ways. We have nothing to be proud of. How about you? Is it pride He is working out of you? Or is it something else? Ask Him to reveal it. Beg Him to remove it. Long trials work out deep issues within us. So what happened in the end? We go through the whole book, we go through 38, 39 chapters, and then something happens. What is the response of God here that we can learn another lesson about? What happened in the end? Let's look at this. Then the Lord answered Job. So God begins by mentioning Job's name to Satan. He knows what Satan's going to do. Satan is completely in his control. God is preparing a great trial for Job to bring about some amazing good in his life. Out of love for him, God has set this up and designed this thing that Satan will do of his own free will, but God in His transcendent power is overarching the entire time. Nothing can happen without God's perfect will and His determined counsel and purpose. So he endures these trials. He endures the loss of his family. He endures the loss of his wealth. He endures the loss of his health. Then he has his friends come to him and accuse him of evil. And this goes on for weeks and months and years. And he gets so down and so depressed and so sad that he wants to die. He curses the day he was alive. And so we get down right at the end of what we know from reading the book is the end of the trial. We're coming right to the close now. And what happens? What is the result of this? What does Job get out of all this suffering and all this difficulty? What does he get? He gets to see God. He receives the unique and special benefit of seeing God. God appeared to this man. You look and you see what happened to Job, and it blows the mind that God would be able to take, that He would do this. He would take so much from Job in such horrific fashion. Imagine all of your children dying in one day. Imagine all of your wealth being lost in one day. And then imagine your health deteriorating for years to the point that you wish you were dead. Imagine God doing this. Why would God go to such depths? Why would He do this? So He can appear to you. That's why. Knowing Job's deep misunderstanding of himself and his Creator, God pummeled Job for quite likely years to finally manifest His innermost thoughts. That if God were to show up, He would stand toe-to-toe with him and argue his case. In an act of incredible mercy, the Holy Maker shows up and actually speaks to Job in one of the longest recorded conversations in all of Scripture between a man and God. Think about this. He shows up and He speaks to Job. In the following 95 verses, let that sink in. God speaks to this man for 95 verses. God reveals His complete majesty and mouth-stopping power to Job as he lists His wonders in fashioning and ruling creation. This is such a life-altering, psyche-wrecking experience. Job can only respond like this. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes. God puts this man through an unbelievable period of suffering. And what does he do in response to that suffering? He allows this man, whom he had beaten to a pulp, to see his face, to see him. My friends, long trials reveal God in a previously unknown and impossible way to the believer. My friends, when you are selected for a trial so long, for a difficulty so hard, God will reward you by letting you see Himself. A long trial is a special invitation from God for you to be brought into His presence and see Him like so few others ever get to see Him. I had countless new visions of God through my affliction. I learned that once He determines to do a work in you, there is no power on earth that can stop Him. I learned because I tried over and over and over. I begged Him to stop over and over and over. I pleaded for mercy. Lord, let this end. But I saw in Him a granite will. When He determines to do something, He cannot be stopped in doing it. He is tough, He is hard, and He is immovable when He determines to do something. I saw this in Him. I learned the lengths He would go to purge the dross from a soul and make for Himself an instrument He could use. I learned that He will take you very deeply into trial. He will take you so far down you never thought you could ever find yourself down there. He is extreme in His personality as compared to us. Think about it. He crucified His own Son to redeem you. He will take you so low to make you what He wants to make you. I learned of His absolute faithfulness. In all my trials, I was never once hungry. In all my trials, I never once slept on the street. In all my trials, my loving wife never turned her back on me. I've said it before and I will say it again. In my life of 48 years, I have never had anyone love me sacrificially as Jesus Christ loves me other than my wife. She is Christ to me in her faithfulness to me in my suffering. And He preserved her to love me when I was falling apart. He never was allowed to touch my family. God said, you will go so far and you will go no further. And I saw it with my own eyes, that Satan is but his pawn. He is not his equal. I saw His immeasurable patience with sin in His people. I struggled so much. I have struggled so much. Various types of sins have entered my life that I struggle with in this deep darkness. And every time I failed, He would wash me in His forgiveness in a way that I could not understand. He would keep forgiving, and He would keep loving me. And even when I fell and I curled up in His arms and I said, "I'm so sorry," He would wash me, and I would feel that it's okay. I purpose this too, Wes. And I will teach you through this too. I know God because of my suffering. I do not need you to tell me who He is. I do not need to read it. I do not need to be convinced. I know God because I have seen His face in 13 years of misery. I know His voice, and I will never forget the sound of it. My friend, He will appear to you as well. He has not forgotten you in the middle of this. As He was hard on you in adversity, so He will be good to you in revealing Himself to you. Though He put you through hell, He will allow you to see Himself in a way few others will ever be allowed this side of eternity. But there is one more lesson we want to take from this. What happens when the trial is over? What happens when it's over? When God was finished, when He talked to Job, when He humbled Job and showed him His majesty, gave him the great and precious benefit of seeing His face. What did this harsh, hard, difficult God do? Let's look at the verses. This is our point. When complete, God restores what He has taken, and then some. Let us look to Job. Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job. This is Job 42, right at the end of the book. Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. For he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. In all the land were found no women so beautiful as the daughters of Job. And their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children and grandchildren for 4 generations. So Job died, old and full of days. I saw this in my own life. I'm seeing it in my own life now. Slowly, God has paid off the debts the years of ministry created. He has given me more ministry now than I have ever had before. And He is healing the wounds those years of difficulty created. And He is not finished yet. As Job, I look forward to the days where God's hand is upon me for blessing. As solidly and as strongly and as committed as He was to my adversity to perfect me, I know that He will turn that same force of will upon blessing me, upon bringing me joy and rebuilding everything that He has taken from me. If you are in a long trial, you will eventually see His favor again too. He will decree an end to your suffering, and He will begin to rebuild that which He has taken away. But what if I die, you say? There are some people listening tonight who will not see health again in this life. There are people who will not see joy again before they meet with death. What if my long trial ends in the grave, Wes? How will I have these losses returned to me if I die? But don't you see? You are the most blessed of all. Let me quote Job's words to you now. Consider them deeply as you reach the end of your trial. Look at this. Job 19, the best end of all. He said, "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another." You see, my friends, when you pass, you will see Him perfectly. You will leave us. We will be sad. We will be broken. We will mourn. But you will rejoice, for you will see Him forever. And you have the best ending of all. And Job, look at what he said here in his suffering. "How my heart yearns within me." My friends, I know that God is going to turn my suffering into joy, and I know that He is going to restore all that He has taken from me. But like you, many of you, I will have to live the rest of my days on this earth, and I will see yet greater suffering. And I will too will meet an end at some point where I know that I am embarking on the last journey. And I, as much as I am glad to be here and to serve God, I know there are many important things for me to do, and I know there are many important things for you to do. I want to love my wife and take care of my children and try and rebuild this kingdom that has fallen apart in the United States. But my heart yearns within me. I don't want any more of it. I'm ready. And if you are being called to that last journey, you can be ready with joy, for you will see God. And one day we will see Him with you together.